much, Michelle, and good morning to you all. It is now 8 o'clock, right on the button, as we take a look at the top headlines on this Wednesday morning. And at least 12 people, including 2 police officers, are dead after masked men opened fire at the French satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo. 8 others were injured, 4 of them now in critical condition. The attackers reportedly fled the scene and are at large. French President François Hollande calling this an act of terrorism. The city's terror alert is now at its highest level, with security raised at churches, media offices, and on public transit. The newspaper was previously attacked in 2011 when it was firebombed for publishing a caricature of the Islamic prophet Muhammad. Here at home, the man accused of the vicious attack on a 6-year-old girl makes his first court appearance today. James Clifford Paul will appear before a Stony Plain judge this morning. He is charged with attempted murder, aggravated sexual assault, and kidnapping. Police allege that on December 20th, Clifford attacked a 6-year-old girl on the Paul First Nation. She was discovered naked and unresponsive hours later. The girl is still recovering at the Stollery. Well, more than 150 people turned out Tuesday to mourn the loss of 6 lives taken in last week's mass murder. 6 family members, including 2 children, were killed last week in what our police chief calls a case of extreme domestic violence. They were remembered Tuesday during a traditional Buddhist ceremony. The shooter, Fu Lam, also took his own life. Now, those left behind face what friends admit will likely be a lengthy healing journey.
Not only the Vietnamese community, but also a lot of friends in Edmonton who heard this sad news. They also come here with all their love.
We try to support the victim like this, and probably the government or city have to work out something to prevent this happen again.
I just support for the Vietnamese community. That's why I come to visit him, because that's a horrible story.
Service for a 7th victim who was killed inside that North End home is set for tomorrow. And that horrific attack has police sounding the alarm on a troubling trend of domestic violence in our city. Police say they received 15 such calls this past weekend. That's 3 times as many as they received during the same period in 2014. And police add the severity of the violence has worsened too. So they are asking residents not to turn a blind eye and report any act of violence.
Sadly, in my capacity as the staff sergeant in charge of the EPS Domestic Offender Crime Section, this number is troubling and yet all too familiar.
This is not an issue that's isolated to any single demographic, so we want to make sure that even for our newcomers that they're aware that, you know, they have different rights in Canada and that there are supports here in Edmonton.
Since 2012, police say they have received about 7,600 calls annually tied to domestic violence complaints. Mounties are investigating after a woman's body was discovered in a Strathmore home. Officers received the 911 call yesterday around 1 a.m. When they arrived on scene, they discovered the caller dead inside the home. Her name is not being released until the family is notified. Police are now treating this as a suspicious death. Alberta's education minister receiving a bad grade from the ethics commissioner. Marguerite Trussler says that it was inappropriate of Gordon Dirks to award funding for modular classrooms in his riding when he ran for office in Calgary-Elbow. The report says Dirks used government resources for personal gain. However, Trussler adds his actions did not break the letter of the law, so no actions, or sanctions rather, will be imposed.
The Premier really has an obligation here to do the right thing and to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
That is the value that drives the decisions that we make.
Saskew adds that abuses such as this underline the need for transparent and prioritized infrastructure lists in Alberta. The White House appears to have set up a roadblock to the proposed Keystone XL pipeline.
We indicated that the president would veto similar legislation that was being considered by the previous Congress, and our position on this hasn't changed. Again, there's a well-established process that should not be undermined by legislation.
A bill that would clear the road for Keystone has been tabled in the U.S. Congress, which is now controlled by the Republicans who backed the pipeline. Last month, Obama seemed cool to the project, saying Keystone would do nothing to trim American gasoline prices. Meanwhile, Alberta's economic growth rate could be cut in half with world oil prices hitting the bottom of the barrel. Bank of Montreal chief economist Douglas Porter says our province will no longer lead Canada when it comes to GDP growth. Alberta's economy jumped 3.9% last year and has led the way for 20 years, with an annual average of 3.5%. On Tuesday, oil fell again, down to just over 49 cents U.S. a barrel, part of a downward spiral now entering its 7th month. Well, the good news is experts believe oil prices will rebound to $60 U.S. at some point in the first half of the year.
People in Alberta depend on foreign food, right? We import a significant amount of food and clothing and electronics and all of that kind of thing, cars. And so those costs will go up.
Roberts calls this mini oil crisis a wake-up call to Alberta companies must attract greater foreign investment and become more dominant on the world stage. Crews are starting construction of the pedway that will connect the Winter Garden and the new downtown arena, and it comes with a little bit of a headache. That means that there will be road closures for the next 6 months. That's on 104th Avenue in both directions between the area of 101st and 103rd Street. Monday to Friday, the closures will run beginning at 7 p.m. until 6 a.m. every morning.